Welcome to Pattern and Craft. I'm Courtney, and in today's video I wanted to do a tutorial on this easy crochet blanket. I know my past content has all been friendship bracelet related, so this is a bit of a change. I hope you'll stick around if you're a returning viewer. Otherwise, there will be more bracelet content coming probably in the future. I just tend to kind of switch crafts every so often and get really into one. And when I started my channel, it was all friendship bracelet related, but I've also, in the meantime, I stopped doing videos for a little while, and I did ceramics, and I did beaded earrings, and I did custom printed fabric designs and cards and all sorts of things. So I just wanted to kind of come back and just show you whatever it is that I am working on. And currently I've been heavily into crochet. I've really been loving making patterns and making projects, and all of them are fairly kind of like quick and small and easy to follow along. So I figured they'd be perfect for my YouTube channel to share them. So that being said, this is a crochet blanket that really is easy because it's using all one stitch. Well, it's using double crochet, or if you're in the UK, treble crochets and chains. And it's basically switching between granny clusters and V-stitch. So I do a row of granny clusters and then 2 rows of V-stitch, and then back to the granny clusters and repeat. And we're just doing color changes. All the V-stitches are done in the cream, and then the grannies switch color each row that I do a granny. The other thing I wanted to show you is that if you do not flip your work in between rounds, this is what happens. We get this vortex, twisty, not very square kind of effect going on. So we are going to be flipping our work every other round so that this does not happen. And also, I did try it where it was, I was doing the granny cluster rows face up and the V-stitch rows face down, hoping that would give me a more square piece, but I still ended up with the twisting, unfortunately. So we are going to be flipping every other round for this project, so that we get nice square corners and straight stripes and no twisting. So as far as materials, I have been using the Made with Love, the Cottony One worsted weight category 4 yarn that is a cotton acrylic, and it calls for a number 5 or a 5mm hook. I'm actually using a 5.5mm hook because I tend to crochet a little bit tightly. So I did a test swatch during just regular granny square, and I noticed my stitches were kind of bunching, and I didn't want that to happen. So I went up half a size on my hook, but you can choose whatever hook size works with your style of crochet and the yarn that you choose. You do not need to use this specific yarn. I'm just showing you that's the yarn I am using. You can use a similar weight or a different weight or a different fiber content. You choose your yarn. You will need, if you want to follow this, color pattern, you're going to need 5 colors. You're going to need 4 colors that sort of have an ombre effect. I'm doing light to dark with these like neutral kind of rosy tones. And then I am going to have the cream color as my V-stitch rows in between the stripes of color. You will need 2 skeins of your lighter color, of your contrast color, because that's being used more in this project than all the other colors. You will not even use a whole skein of each of your color rows, but you will need maybe 2 skeins of your lighter tone, although I did do a couple of samples that didn't work out right, so maybe you could get away with 1 I might give that information in the description. I'll weigh the final project, but just so you know, you might need 2 of that lighter color. The rest you can get away with 1 ball of yarn. I will list the exact colors I'm using. I don't have all the labels right now with me, but I'll put it in the description. And then I'm also going to have a PDF of the pattern if you prefer to have the pattern chart and the written instructions and step-by-step photos. I will make that available on my Ravelry store. I recently started uploading patterns to that, and that will have all your materials, amounts, and all the details you need to make this exact blanket. But feel free to use whatever yarns you do have on hand. You could do you do just 2 colors, you could do rainbow color, you could do whatever you want. So that's just the information for what I'm doing, and you can choose to switch it up if you want. Also, you will need a little tapestry needle, so that's for weaving in ends. Or it's also called a darning needle or a yarn needle, something with a large eye, so you can get the yarn through there and weave it in more easily. And then scissors. So that's all you need to get started with this project, and I think that's all. So let me zoom in so we can start. Okay, so to get started, we're gonna pick the lightest of our 4 colors, not the background colors, but of the 4 colors, start with your lightest one. And I like to start with a magic ring. Here, let me get centered. Okay, so making a magic ring, you have a little bit more control about the tightness of the center of your work. If you do a chain ring, that's fine if that's what you prefer, but I like the magic ring because I can pull it nice and tight after I'm done stitching into it. So this is how I do it. I have my tail facing me, and my working yarn up to the top, and I just do 2 fingers and wrap it around and make an X. So around, and then under, over, and through. Let me show you slower. So make your X. Sorry, it's a little bit hard. I haven't done a video in a while. Okay, under, over, pull through and twist, and then I'm going to yarn over with my working yarn, and then pull through that little loop. So now I have my ring, and I have my start of my chain. I'm going to do 2 more chains to do a chain 3. That would represent my first double crochet or treble if you're in the UK. Then I'm going to yarn over, go into the ring, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2 for my first double crochet. Sorry about my hands, they're really dry. It's winter, they just do that. I did put lotion, I'm sorry. Okay, so I like you would do 3 for a granny cluster, you know, double crochet, and 1 more. But I like to do 2 to start if I'm not continuing with my colors, and I would work into the corner if I was doing all 1 color, you know, for the next round and the next round and the next round. But since I'm not, and I'm going to be finishing off after this round, because I won't use this color again for many rows, or for many rounds, I like to do 2, then a corner, and then I'll show you why at the end, because I like to do needle finishing. So chain 2 for a corner, yarn over into your ring, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, have your first double crochet of your next granny cluster, and we're going to do 3, so do 2 more. Sorry about trying to stay centered, but it's a little hard. Okay, so I'm going to tighten my ring a little bit just by pulling on it, and now you can see that I have 2 double crochet here, which is part of a granny cluster. Now I have a full granny cluster here because it's 1, 2, 3 double crochets. I'm going to do another chain 2 for the corner, and then 3 more double crochets. Ooh. It's always harder when you're on camera and you're not like quite sitting the way you normally would, and you're trying to keep it in the frame. So this is a challenge. I hope I'll get better at that so that I can do some crochet videos that are worthwhile for watching. Anyway, so there we go. That's our second granny cluster. Now I'm going to do another corner, 1, 2, and then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets. Hold on, my yarn is pulling. It fell on the floor. 1 second. Okay, do 2 more to make 3 on this cluster. I'm going to pull my ring a little bit so I can see how many I have. So now I have 1, 2, 3 full granny clusters and 1 partial. So I only need 4, so I'm going to do a chain 2 from my corner. I'm going to finish off my, whoops, let me pull this. This is getting a little confusing, so let me pull this so you can see better. Now that makes sense, right? Okay, so we have part of a granny cluster, a corner, part of a granny cluster, a corner, another, or sorry, all of a granny cluster, a corner, granny cluster, corner, granny cluster, corner. Now we just need 1 more double crochet to finish this partial granny cluster. Did I say cluster enough times? All right, now the reason I want to pull my yarn to tighten my ring, there we go. So the reason I start with the middle of a granny cluster instead of at the corner, because I like to do a needle finish, so it just looks a little nicer than the normal you would, I guess you'd normally slip stitch and then chain 1 and then like pull that tight and like cut off, but then you get this weird little like knot, and if you did it in the corner you'd work over it, but I still find that it leaves a bump and I don't like that, so let's undo that. And basically we just finished our last double crochet, and I'm going to cut my yarn. I'm going to pull through. You might think I'm crazy, but it makes sense when you see this. So I'm going to do a needle finish for this, and I do like to weave in my ends as I go because it just keeps everything much more tidy, and then they're not in your way. They aren't like getting worked into your project accidentally. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our yarn and we're going to go through this stitch, so kind of like under the top 2 loops but over this little extra bit there. We're just going to wrap it around and then go back into our stitch, like back into the top of the stitch we just made. But I like to go to the back and go through the 2 loops, the top loop and then the back loop. And pull, not too tight. We're not like trying to make a knot. We're trying to make it look like the other 2 stitches on either side. So we just made this one by looping around this stitch and then going back into this stitch. And then we can just kind of finish off our ends however looks best. Don't pull too tight, just pull lightly so that you can weave in your ends. I like to go into this ring in the middle because there's a lot of stitches close together, so you won't see the yarn really. It'll just kind of hide in there, as opposed to trying to weave it into the actual stitches. I like to weave into the bottom of the stitches where they're going around the previous ones, and then we're just going to cut that off. Nice and close, but don't cut your work. And then we're good. We don't need to make any knots. We don't need to worry about the ends coming out, especially with this yarn. It's very, like, I don't know, just the texture, it kind of sticks to itself, so it doesn't, you don't have to worry about anything coming undone. And now we're going to weave in the other ends. Sorry. This is riveting. Okay, there we go. So this was our tail from our ring. So this one we can pull tight because we want it tighter. We don't want a big hole in the center. So I can pull that a little tighter as I weave in my end, just to pull that together and make it not so wide. I don't like big wide holes in the middle of my blanket, but and just maybe like one more time. Try to go in between the yarns, not through them, which is actually a little easier for me with a blunt end needle, which this is. It's not sharp. So that's my preference, but some people like sharp needles. It's up to you. As long as it has a big enough eye for the yarn. Okay, so now we have our little center. Got a long way to go, but it's okay. The rest, that's the hardest part, is the start of any crochet project, is the beginning. From now on, it's like a little bit more repetitive, and it gets easier and easier as you have more rounds, and you'll see. Okay, now flip, very important, flip the work. Now we're gonna do the next thing, which is V-stitch row. If you're doing a regular granny square, you'd kind of just repeat that. You do granny clusters in each corner. There's a specific way to do corners, but you would use the same stitches. But now we're gonna switch to V-stitch, and we're gonna switch to our cream color yarn. So the way I like to start my next round is, you could like slip stitch and chain. I like to do standing double crochets I think it's just easier. So we're gonna make a slip stitch. I'll show you that again in case you don't really know how to make a slip stitch. You just kind of make a knot, but like leave a loop, you know, and then you pull it on your hook. And now to make a standing double crochet, so instead of coming up from the bottom, we're coming from the top. And we go into any corner chain space. So these are our corners. Okay, we go into any corner and we yarn over under our hook. And then we go into the corner and we pull up a loop. And then we pull through two, keeping that extra loop kind of held down with our index finger, and then we yarn over, and then we pull through both of those loops. So we just made a double crochet, and it attached to our work, and it worked really well, right? So we are in a corner, but I don't want to, like you would normally have a V-stitch here, and a chain two for the corner. I'm gonna start on the side and then come back and make my corner, and there's a reason I do that. There's always a method to the madness. Okay, chain one. Make another double crochet into the corner chain space. And then now we have a V-stitch. So a V-stitch really just is, it's a V. So it's a double crochet, a chain one, and another double crochet. So it forms sort of a V with a chain one between the two double crochets. And it has the same stitch count as a granny cluster. That's why mathematically this works out, because the granny clusters just double crochet, double crochet, double crochet, but this is a V-stitch, so it's double crochet, chain one, double crochet. So it works out, it's the same amount of stitches. So we do like basically the same thing, just with a little space instead of a stitch in the middle of our granny cluster. Now we're gonna chain one because we're on a side now. In the corners we do chain two, and the sides between either V-stitches or clusters, we do a chain one. Now we're gonna do another V-stitch in the next corner, so we chain space, double crochet, and then we're gonna do a chain one, and then a double crochet. Now we're gonna do a chain two for the corner, and now we're gonna do another V-stitch for this side, still in the same cornered chain space. So double crochet, chain one, double crochet. So now we have our corner. So our corner is a V-stitch, chain two, and another V-stitch, or double crochet, double crochet, chain one, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. That's our corner. Now we're on the side again, so we're doing a chain 1 because we're do chain 1s on the sides. Now we're going to do another V-stitch into that corner, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet to make our V-stitch, and then chain 2 because we're now doing the corner. Now a double crochet, a chain 1, a double crochet for our second V-stitch in the corner. Got our corner done. So we have half corner, a corner, a corner, chain 1, next corner, V-stitch, I like to shift my stitches kind of if they're stuck on the wrong spot. Chain 2 to turn the corner, double crochet for our next V-stitch in the corner, chain 1, double crochet. Oops, see, that's what I mean about tails getting in the way, so I don't like to have a lot of them hanging out because they kind of interrupt. Chain 1. Okay, so now we need to go back into the corner that we started with. We're going to do a double crochet, a chain 1, another double crochet to create our V-stitch, and then chain 2 for finish the corner. And then now we just slip stitch into this stitch. See that? We're putting our hook through the top of this first double crochet that we made in this round, pulling through a loop, and then pulling through the loop on our hook. And that just finishes with a slip stitch. Now we are going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then flip our work, remember? And then we're going to work into this corner. And I know that this is technically in this stitch and we should slip stitch over to be in the corner, but honestly, it makes it like more bulky and it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to go straight into finishing my V-stitch. This is the first double, or this chain 3 represents the first double crochet of our V-stitch. The chain 1 is the center of it. Now I'm going to do a double crochet to finish it. So see what I mean? It's like it's not really in the corner, but it's close enough. And then once you go all the way around and connect it, it looks fine. So it looks good. So now we've done our first V-stitch of this row because remember we did a row of V-stitching here. Now we're going to do another round of V-stitching around, and then we will go back to doing granny square clusters. And we did flip our work in between our rounds so far. So we have basically the row before the one you just did should always kind of match the one you're working on. So right now I'm working right side up. The previous round was on the wrong side. The center's right side up. So that's how it works. Okay, chain 2 for your corner. That's how we avoid the twist, you know, the vortex of doom. Okay, we did the chain 2. Now we're doing another V-stitch into the corner. Remember, a V-stitch is just 2 double crochets separated by a chain 1. So we have our little corner. It looks a little wonky just because that's where we joined and everything, but don't worry, it won't really show in the end. Okay, chain 1 because we're now working on a side. Now we're going to V-stitch into this chain space. So this is the first time we're not working into a corner or a ring. We're working into our like sides of our work. So we're just going to put a V-stitch there. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. separate a V-stitch into this chain space, chain 1, because we're not at the corner yet, so I only need chain 1, not chain 2. Now do a V-stitch into the corner. Oop. And then chain 2 for our corner. And then a V-stitch again into the same corner chain space. Shift your stitches if you need to make room for them. So now we have another corner done. Chain 1, V-stitch into the side chain space. And I'm going to keep going around because I think you get it at this point. It's just doing those same V-stitches. We'll do V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, chain 2, V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, you know? It's just the same pattern all the way around. So I'll speed up the video here and stop talking. Oops. But first, I'll fix that mistake. See, sometimes when I talk, I skip a chain or something. So don't forget to do your chain 1 and then go on into the corner. Whoa. So I just made a mistake there, or I almost made a mistake there. So I do want you to be careful when you're working into your first V-stitch row or round. Sorry, I'm calling them rows, but we're working in the round because we're going around. We're not working in rows. Rows would be back and forth. Sorry about that. Okay, so I almost worked into this chain space. And you don't want to, well, first of all, I need to finish the corner anyway. So I'm going to work my double crochet into the corner to finish my corner here. So I have my V-stitch, chain 2, V-stitch. But you don't, the thing you have to be a little bit careful of is not to work into the center of the V-stitches. So you have 2 V-stitches on each side of the round previous. But they are separated by a chain 1, you know, they have a chain 1 in the center of them, but the chain 1 that you want to be working into is the one between the V-stitches. So if your chain 1 space is into stitches that are both in the same spot, you're working in the wrong place. If your chain 1 space that you're working into is between 2 stitches that start and end on either side of the granny cluster, then you're in the right place. I hope that makes sense because I almost just did it myself. Like if I was to work into this, that would be wrong. That's the center of my V-stitch. We're not working into, we're working between the V-stitches. Okay. Well, I'm coming to the end of my round here. So I'm going to do one last V-stitch in this side chain space, and then I am back at my corner. So this is where we, remember we chained 3, or we chained 4 to make our part of our V-stitch, and then we double crocheted. So we're back here, we're gonna do chain 1, and this is where I'm gonna kind of finish off a little bit more normally. I'm gonna slip stitch. Again, I guess most people would chain 1 and then pull the yarn and make a knot. I don't do that, so I'm going to just cut my yarn and needle finish it right away. Okay, so we're gonna finish off what we just did. So I like to, as I said, I pull out my yarn. I don't do the chain 1 pull and make a knot thing. I just start kind of weaving in my ends and make it tidy and kind of pull together anything that looks a little loose. whatever kind of like makes sense. I'm not too picky about it, but as long as it ends up looking okay in the end and I get rid of my yarn. I do like to work into the bottom of the stitches, like I said. So I'm going in through all the stitches in the corner. That wasn't the most beautiful thing right there, but we can just kind of manipulate it a little bit to look nice, right? Okay, so I'm working into my corner to get rid of my yarn. One thing that makes it so it doesn't, you know, people are afraid they're either this is gonna pull or it's gonna pull out, but if you go through and then you skip one and then go back through again and double it back on itself, it kind of locks it into place and it doesn't go anywhere. So with that little like loop there keeps it from pulling out this, or yeah, anyway, it locks it in. It can't go both ways, so it's pretty much in there now. And I'm gonna snip off. And then I do have another one here. Now I could weave that into the same corner, but then it's gonna get kind of bulky, so I don't wanna do that. I'm gonna bring it down here and weave it in at the corner previous, just so we don't have all of our ends being woven into the same spot, because that can get, yeah, just like make a lump kind of. So I'm gonna actually go down through this stitch lightly, no pulling tight here. Just, you know, keep the same tension as the rest of your work. And then into the corner, and then skip one, and then back through the corner, and whoops, there you go. So that'll kind of like lock it in, and then keep it from unraveling. You'll be fine, you don't need knots. But if you feel better and you want to make knots to tie your work, or if you have a particularly slippery yarn, that's fine. Okay, so we have our first 3 rounds now, and we flipped between each one so that we are going to get nice square edges. I'll show you how to start the next round, and then from there it's pretty much just doing the same thing over and over. So we're going to switch to our next darkest yarn now, and that would be this rosy colored one for me, and it'll be whatever color you want for yourself. And I will do my slip knot to start, and then I will yarn over and do a standing double crochet. And again, I like to do kind of start in the middle of a granny cluster as opposed to a corner, because I'm weird. And I like to do the needle finishing, so it just makes more sense to me. So I'm going to do 2 double crochets into any corner. You might want to pick a different corner than the one you wove your yarns into, just so you don't have like keep weaving into the same areas. And then chain 1, and then make a granny cluster into the chain space. Remember, we're working between the V-stitches, not into them. So between them is this chain space right here. Because if we work here, we're in a V-stitch. If we work here, we're in a V-stitch. We're working between the V-stitches. So that's the only thing that's a little bit tricky about this pattern. Otherwise, it's pretty simple. And we have flipped our work. Yes, we're good. Okay, so 3 double crochet to make our next granny cluster. This yarn is a little challenging to work with. It's kind of sticky and it's kind of spongy, so I'm not doing my best stitching at the moment, but I think you'll get the point, and it still looks fine in the end. Next chain space, and remember we have a chain 1 between our granny clusters on the edges, and then we have a chain 2 in the corners. So we're just making granny cluster, chain 1, granny cluster, chain 1, and then when we get to in the chain spaces between the V stitches. And then when we get to the corner, we'll do this. We'll do a granny cluster. It's kind of the same way we started our project. we chain 2, 1, 2, because we're in a corner and we're turning the corner, and then we do a granny cluster again into the corner. Oop, I don't like how sometimes my loops are a little loose, so I'm gonna fix that. Redo that granny cluster. There you go. Or redo that double crochet, the first in my granny cluster. A cluster is 3, not 1. Okay. Now I've made my first granny cluster of this side. I've done my corner, and then now I'm working on this side. And it's pretty much the same as this, you just repeat it all the way around. So chain 1 between your granny clusters, except in the corners. Work into the space between the V-stitches. And just keep on going down the sides and going around. It's pretty simple. That's why I wanted to start with something pretty simple as my first crochet tutorial. I do more complicated stuff, but I didn't want to start with something too complex because I'm getting back in the swing of video making, and it is its own challenging thing on its own. The crafts are honestly much easier than the videos for me. So I've made my corner, granny cluster, and now I'm back in another corner. Chain 1, granny cluster, see, I crochet kind of tight, and then chain 2, 1, 2, and then granny cluster again into the corner to turn the corner. Okay, so we're going to keep going all the way around as before, as I've been doing, and then I'll meet you back in this corner to finish it off. So remember, we're going to do granny cluster, corner, granny cluster, and then I'll meet you over here. Okay, so I've gotten back to the corner. So I've done my first granny cluster in this corner, or I guess the second one. First on this side. 1, 2 chains to make the corner. Now I'm gonna finish my first granny cluster by making a double crochet. And then I'm just going to snip off my yarn and pull through. And then I'm gonna weave in my end like I did before, so I'll show you that needle finish again. So we have this coming straight out of our stitch, and then we have the chain here that represents, actually we have a standing double crochet, so it's a little different. So that's the top of our stitch from before. I'm actually gonna like go right above it because I'm making the top of the stitch again. So I'm just gonna pull that one down and then go under these 2 loops and then back into my stitch and through that back bump too. And you do have to pull this like top of your standing double crochet down to like make that finish nicely. See? But yeah, now it looks good, and we can weave in our ends, and it looks a little like mushy, like I need to kind of flatten out my work, but once you kind of, you know, give it a little tug and a smush, it looks fine. It's just that I was kind of crumpling my work while I was working. So I'm gonna weave in those ends the same way I did before, and then maybe I'll show you one more time, just the next round, and then you kind of get it because you would just go back to this part. So I'll show you the next round, but then I think you can figure it out the rest on your own because it's just repeating the same thing over and over. But when we worked here, we were just doing corners. So I think I will show you this next round of V-stitches because we have sides to work into too. So hold on. Okay, I'm back. Remember, we have to flip our work. So we want to see that the row that we just worked on is the back of the stitching, not the front. The front's a little bit more defined and looks like that. And then when you flip, you kind of, it looks a little bit more bumpy. So you know you're working on the back. Now we're going to do a slip knot on our hook and yarn over for to do a standing double crochet. And we do want to work into a corner, any corner you want. I'm going to work into this one. So you do work into a corner and you work the side. You don't do the whole corner, you do the side, just so that it works out a little nicer when you come back around and finish it, and then flip your work. It's just in a good spot. So I'm going to do my standing double crochet, my chain one, a regular double crochet. That's my first V-stitch of this side. Now I'm going to do a chain one for the in between my V-stitches. Sorry, I'm not really in the, okay. And then double crochet in the next chain space. Chain one, double crochet to finish your V-stitch. So chain one, V-stitch in the next chain space, which is a double crochet, chain one, double crochet to make the V-stitch, and then a chain one between V-stitches, and then the next V-stitch is in the next side chain space. And then chain one, and then go into the corner chain space, make a V-stitch. I know this is a little boring on camera, but it's so relaxing to do as, you know, a craft, as a project for me. So now we've made one side, see? We've got all of our V-stitches along this side. Now we need to do a corner, so we do chain two. And then we work into the same corner because we are now on the next side. And we do a V-stitch into the same corner chain space. And then we're gonna just continue along. We're gonna do chain one and then V-stitch and chain one, V-stitch, chain one, V-stitch, and then work another corner and then go all the way around, and I'll meet you back here to show you how to connect it and go up to the next round again, just one more time to kind of as a refresher. So one moment. Okay, we're almost there. So we have finished the V-stitches all the way around, and I'm back to the corner where I'm going to join and continue to the next round. So I've done my V-stitch chain one. So into the corner chain space, I'm going to do another V-stitch. A little tight in the corners sometimes, and the tails get in the way. All right, so I did my V-stitch. Now I'm going to do chain two for the corner, and then I'm going to, remember we did this before, but I just wanted to kind of show you again. We're going to slip stitch into the top of the standing crochet right into those two loops. We're going to stick our hook, then we're going to pull through a loop. We're not going to yarn over, we're just going to pull that loop all the way through the one on our hook. And then we've completed that corner, and remember we're gonna flip. Oh wait, sorry. You're not gonna flip. We are going to chain four, and then we will flip. 1, 2, 3, which is gonna represent the 3 will represent our next double crochet, and then the chain one that we have between stitches. So chain 4 total, then flip, and now we're gonna work our corner of our second round of V-stitching, because we do 1 round of the granny square clusters, and then we do 2 rounds of the V-stitching. So to do this, we have the first half of our V-stitch already created. We're gonna yarn over and do our double crochet to finish this V-stitch, and then slipping over my words here, and then chain 2 for the corner, 1, 2, and my yarn's getting stuck, and then make our V-stitch for our next side. So that's the only time we're kind of working a full corner instead of working on a side. Chain 1, finish the V-stitch into the corner. Okay, so on this round, the second V-stitch round, we do a full corner and then continue around and join and finish. When we did our previous round, we started with half the corner and came around and then finished into that stitch. But that's so that when we flip it, we can, like now we're here, we can continue on with the corner. I don't know, that's just the way I like to do it. You could probably start anywhere really and do just fine and bring up to the second round. This is just the way I like to do it for this pattern. So I'm going to continue all the way around and do my V-stitches, and actually I'm going to switch back to my actual blanket instead of the sample, so that I can finish off up to the point where I change my pattern and do a border. So basically you'll just continue, if you're making this blanket the same way, you'll keep doing 1 row of granny clusters, 2 rows of V-stitches as you know, shown in the video, and then repeat. So another row of granny clusters. So granny clusters, V-stitch, V-stitch, granny clusters, V-stitch, V-stitch, granny clusters, V-stitch, V-stitch, and cycle through your 4 colors, then cycle through them again, and then do 1 row of the V-stitching, but do not do the second row, because we're gonna, on the very border of our blanket, you could just end it this way and it looks fine. But I want to do a kind of special stitch on the very edge of my blanket. So I'm gonna do that and I'll show you how. So keep making your blanket all the way till you get to this round. Basically, you'll have your last row of granny stitches or granny clusters, and then you'll have 1 row of V-stitching, and then stop and then watch the rest of this video. But you're not going to stop after this color, you're going to stop after your 4th color. So I have a few more rows to go. Okay, I'm back and I have crocheted up to the point where I am ready to start my border. So you can see that we have cycled through our colors twice, because we have 4 colors, and then we have repeated them, and then done 1 round of V-stitch. Okay, I've zoomed in and I'm actually I undid a little bit of the work that I had done so that I can show you how to close the corner and start for the next round. So remember, we worked our first V-stitch, and then we went along with V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, chain 1, and then we came back and did our last V-stitch into the corner chain space of the previous round. And now we're going to chain 2 because it's a corner, and we're going to slip stitch into that first stitch, that first double crochet, to finish off the round. So we have our corner. Now we're going to chain 4, and the chain 3 represents the first double crochet plus another chain for chain 1 between. So now we're going to turn our work, and you can see I'm running pretty pretty short on yarn, so I'm gonna have to switch out and get some more yarn here, and you will see how I add yarn. So we've done what represents our first double crochet, and then we've done a chain one, and now we're gonna do another double crochet into the chain space. And here's where I'm gonna run out of yarn. So I'm gonna just pull that yarn all the way through on my double crochet. Then I'm gonna reinsert my hook into those two loops. And then I'm gonna get my new yarn. And I'm just gonna fold my yarn and then put that on the hook and pull through both loops. And now I basically have, I can keep on going with this new yarn. So I'm gonna do a chain one, and I'm gonna do another double crochet into this corner chain, into this corner chain space. Looked like I was making a mistake, but I wasn't. Chain one, another double crochet into the chain space. Chain one, and our last double crochet into the chain space. So basically we're working 5 double crochets into the chain space. Sorry, let me pull that a little tighter so it looks nicer. 5 double crochets into the chain space for the corners. Now we're gonna not chain one. In the V-stitch row, we did V-stitch, chain one, V-stitch, but in this row, or in this round, we're going to work from the corner and just go directly into our next thing, which is a double crochet, go into the next chain space, chain one, double crochet in the same chain space, chain one, double crochet in the same chain space. So we're working kind of like shells with, like shell stitch, but with chain ones in between instead of doing solid shell stitch. So that's kind of our next, that's the thing we're going to be repeating over and over all along the row. It's just double crochet, chain one, double crochet, chain one, double crochet. And then we don't chain one in between these groups of 3 double crochet. We just keep repeating this pattern over and over. So we will go into the next chain space. I'll show you one more time. Double crochet, chain one, double crochet, chain one, double crochet. Then we go right into our next chain space with a double crochet. Double crochet, chain one, double crochet, chain one, third double crochet into the same chain space. And then we're just going to keep repeating that all the way around. So when we get to the next corner, I'll show you again without the adding yarn thing. That might have been a little confusing, but just basically in each chain space between the V-stitches, we're working 3 double crochet, each separated by a chain one, but we're not chaining one in between this group and this group. We just start with a double crochet, end with a double crochet, and then again start with a double crochet and move on. All right, so I'm gonna work my way up to the corner and then show you the corner one more time. Okay, so here we are. We finished our 3 double crochet in the chain space before the corner. We're going to do double crochet into the corner, and this time it's gonna be 5 instead of 3. So 5 double crochet separated by a chain one rather than 3 like we do on the side. So double crochet, chain one, double crochet, chain one. Here's our third double crochet, chain one. Here's our fourth, chain one, and here's our fifth. All right, so we might want to pull the stitches so they sit a little nicer. And we have our corner of our border stitch. And then we go back to 3 separated by 1, but not doing 1 in between, just 3 double crochet, 3 double crochet with chain 1s in between. So we're going to do that all along the next side, do the corner just like this, and then come back to where we started. Okay, so through the magic of YouTube, I finished my border all the way around the blanket. I just have to do 1 more group in this chain space and then join it to the corner where we started. So I'm finishing up that last group. Double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, and final double crochet. And then we don't chain, we just do a slip stitch right into this chain space, which was a chain 4 that we started, remember? And it represents a double crochet, chain 1. So we just go into this chain space and do a slip stitch right there in the corner. Oops. It's a little tight because I wove in my ends from earlier, and then we pull out the yarn, and there we have it. We are connected, we have our border. All that's left to do is weave in this final end. So we're gonna take our darning needle or yarn needle or our tapestry needle and then weave into these stitches wherever looks like the best spot, and through the corner. I'm actually gonna go around this guy so that I can loop him in. Tighten up that corner a little bit because we did just stitch into the chain rather than the chain space, but we can fix that with our the way we sew it in to kind of look right. And then I'm actually gonna go, I've already finished some ends in here and I don't want to make it even thicker, so I'm going to go down to the next chain space below it. Oops. And then go through this one. And a lot of people hate weaving in ends, but it doesn't take that long and it looks so much better than tying knots. You can work over your ends, but not really with a what's the word, the granny squares. There's all these open bits, so you can't really work over your ends anyway, so I rather just sew them into the corners, and then you just snip them off and you don't even see them and they don't come undone. It's just fine. All right, so the blanket's done, and I'll go show you it in use on the couch, but let's pull out for a moment and take a look at our handiwork. And the border does lay nice and flat, and the blanket's nice and square. I think there's a little, no, I think I just need to pat it down. It's fine. I haven't even blocked this or anything. This is just straight off the hook. So we're good, looking good. A little bit of rippling at the edges, but I think that's just a tension thing. And once I lay it flat, it'll be fine. If I have to block it, I might. That's where you put it down you pin it down to a surface and steam it. But I think I'm good. All right, I'm gonna show you how big it looks on the couch. It is the perfect size for a couch cushion, the perfect size for a small pet, for a cat, maybe a small dog, and we finished our blanket. We can obviously always do this as a larger blanket, or also it looks good as a pillow cover. I actually took a photo earlier of it, kind of draped over one of my cushions on my couch. And if you did 2 of these and then joined them at the edges, it could be a great pillow cover too. All right, let's go look at it being used by the cute little cat. Well, it looks like it's a winner. Someone has gotten comfy and cozy on their little cat blanket. You can see it's just about the size of a couch cushion, maybe a little smaller so that it fits right on there. Aesthetically pleasing, and we are loafing, not quite in the center. Do you want to get more situated? Yeah? Is it cozy or no? Do we like it? Do we like it? Is it acceptable? I think so, we're purring. Okay, well, it looks like it's gonna get some use. Someone's happy with their blanket and it's a successful project. Yeah, getting cozy. All right. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do make anything using this tutorial, I hope you will tag me if you post it to Instagram. I'm at Pattern and Craft. If you have any questions, please leave a comment on the video and I'll try to get back to you. And of course, like and subscribe. That always helps the algorithm. I hope to see you soon with more crafting videos, either crochet or friendship bracelets or whatever else that is that I'm making at the time. I love to share my tips and tricks and what it is that I'm creating. Happy crafting!